Hi, Japala. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing, Anik?
Good. I'm glad that you could come on and we could have a discussion around acupuncture and life and like all that's good.
Me too. I'm excited. Thank
Good.
you.
So, you're an acupuncturist,
That's right.
and there are, as far as I know, different forms of acupuncture. And so, perhaps maybe you can tell us all a little bit about what you do and what your specific acupuncture is about.
Sure, I'd love to. So there are many different kinds of acupuncture. Most people go to school for a few different kinds, and we take our boards in one of them, and then we usually all specialize afterwards. And I had this great thought recently. I had named my practice Transpersonal Acupuncture probably about 15 years ago.
Hmm.
And I've spent that time giving different definitions for what that means. But recently I was really it was very clear to me that it's based in the five element acupuncture school of acupuncture, but it's bringing acupuncture into a bit of a more psychological realm and supporting people in healing in through that window.
Mm.
It's so
Well, okay. So I want to relate a personal story to this because
sure.
when we first met, I came to you. You're my practitioner,
Right.
my healer, I would say.
You said that. I didn't say
Yeah.
that. You admitted that, right?
I do.
I
I
didn't
call
give
you
you
my
that. I
healer.
didn't give anybody that
Yeah.
information.
But I was coming to you with a physical injury. I had been in a snowboarding accident and had gotten a concussion and had lingering headaches for a year. So I initially had gone to a different acupuncturist and I did not click with the person that I met with, and I almost gave up on it but decided to reach out or try again, and I got you as a recommendation.
Right.
What I wasn't prepared for was that we actually went on a completely different tangent, and it became less about the physical healing and more about I don't know how else to call it, but a personal healing.
Yeah. But we worked on your physical symptom and it did improve. It's
Oh
mostly
yeah.
better. Yeah. So, and most people aren't. I'd have to be honest, even at the time that I started treating you, I wasn't even completely sure of what I was doing in here. I was
Hmm.
almost just going with the flow or going with my intuition. And I wasn't even able to totally articulate it. I had the idea that I
Yeah.
wanted to do it, but I wasn't confident about how I was going to execute it. So you were an example of someone, I could work on the physical symptom. I understood how to treat that, but then it evolved and it kind of naturally evolved between us.
Hmm.
And you're one of my examples of when I look back at our body of work, I say, okay, that's what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
it sort of almost came through practice. And there were many at the time. I still treat most of them.
Hmm.
I probably had 15 clients that I've been treating for a good long while, over 5 years at least, where this process happened. And now looking back, I say, this is a real process. And now I'm more confident how to duplicate it with my new clients.
And so, would you say that over time, as somebody who is practicing I call what you do an art to a
I
certain,
think it's completely an art.
okay,
I,
that it does take practice over time. I mean, you can't come out of school knowing everything.
you can't, it's not even about the knowledge anymore, because I think people come out of, depending on what school you'll go to for acupuncture, you might be better prepared than someone else.
Hmm.
But it's not about that. It's partly based in a clinical experience. And then, of course, for me, it's been a lot of education, self education.
Hmm.
I've read, not exaggerating, probably thousands of books.
You're
Uh,
always reading. I mean, we,
I'm always reading,
yeah.
yeah. And I'm always looking for another piece of information somewhere that fits into the work. It's not, podcasts. Even my clients will introduce me to other things and then I'll go look up their resources.
Hmm.
So, but I don't think I could have even, I feel one of the most key ingredients is one, some clinical practice, some years of, work behind you, but then also it was confidence. That's the one. And confidence in this kind of work is not something you can fake it for a while, but it doesn't work as well until, well, at least for me, it didn't work as well until I truly was confident and truly saw that it really made a difference in all these people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said, okay, so this is one, a real thing. And I had been testing that hypothesis the entire time. How could this be really real? I mean, it's so different than Western science, biomedicine. It's completely, you're talking about it in a totally different way.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, is this really real? Does this really help people? Can you really approach healing this way through this language? And then over the years, it was like, yes, you can. Because look at all these people, they've gotten so much healthier in their lives. So yeah, it works. So now when I have a new client, I say, well, it does work. If you're willing to be part of that, because this is certainly not the acupuncturist office where you go in and I'm like, it's going to be fixed and you're going to leave.
Right.
Unless it's the only exception to that is if I have like a sprained ankle or an acute shoulder thing, easy to treat, was a simple accident. Those, yes, you'll be fixed, you'll leave. If that's what you come in here for. Pretty much anything else, even chronic neck tension, it involves a lifestyle change. It involves a self-inquiry of how, you're living or what your choices you're making.
Mm-hmm. It's a process, but it's also, it's a partnership as well to go through this process.
That's the key. It's a partnership.
Yeah.
That's why it works.
Yeah.
Because it's two people working together, and it's like a synergism of our energies and a trust and like for someone like you, where we've worked together, now we already have a whole language that you and I access when we're speaking together. We have a history of our language. So I can start speaking about something. You already know what I'm talking about. We've talked about it before.
Mm-hmm.
But that's evolved.
It has evolved.
And
when you say language, I think that's perfect, because there are times where if anybody were to hear the conversation we would be having, it wouldn't even make any sense because it seems so esoteric.
Exactly. Right. But that's built.
That is built. That is not something that you can come in right away. And I know that I have had a lot of friends come to you, and there have been some people where I knew that they were coming to you just for a purely physical, like a sprained ankle or something like that. And I've wondered, I know that this will be the best healing for you, and I know there's probably other issues in your life that Japala can very much help you with. But I questioned in my mind, I wonder if this particular person can go there or not.
Yeah, I have that all the time now. So I have a person I've worked with for a long time that we've had these amazing, alchemical results where the person's changed so much over the time we worked together, and then they tell their friends, and their friends come in, and then I have all these mixed results.
Yeah.
I have, and also learning, when I was learning my skill set a little better, I made some mistakes. I would sometimes push people, I'm not a totally pushy person. I push sometimes when I know someone pretty well, but I would even push them by accident. And I had many examples of people who could not come, really fled from this office and could not return, nor could they even tell me. Like they would make an appointment and they wouldn't show up for the next appointment, and they wouldn't even tell me. They would never contact me again.
Right.
because I believe it just triggered something inside them so strongly that they couldn't talk about, but they didn't. They were like, I'm not going there. So I've had plenty of those. Mm-hmm. And then I've had the middle people who I started to work with like that, and were able to articulate that it was too much for them, that it was frightening, that they need to take it slower. And then I would slow it down, and then over time they did get there. So, but you can never tell, because you also get people in here that say they're into it and even can speak a bit of the language, but when it's accessed, it's too much.
Yes. And do you think that is a realization on people's part that they are, although that we say in general that we want to heal or we want to better ourselves or we want to evolve, that the fear of change or bringing up past traumas or experiences just won't allow them to go there?
That's what I think. I think it's a number. I use the simple word of blocks, but it's some blocks, and usually multiple blocks on the person's part.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has that to some degree. I mean, even the people that are curious and willing to do the work, and like someone like me, if I doing this work, I feel fear, and I get nervous, and it makes me scared. I have all those feelings. That doesn't stop, but it's still not stopping me.
Mm-hmm.
I might even go really slow, but it's not stopping me. But it's a huge jump for the population of people that we live amongst and everything, to start talking like this. It's way out of their comfort zone.
Right. There's no context. Like, you would usually go to a doctor and be prescribed something to take, a pill, and then in order to heal, versus like, where's the root cause of that pain coming from?
Right. And how about the fact that a lot of people are in some denial, right? So when they're sitting here having to face that, they have to face the fact that maybe they're not in the right occupation for themselves. Maybe they're not in the right relationship. I mean, big things. Those are really not easy to tackle. It means changing your whole life around them and causing quite a bit of disruption and likely discomfort and pain even. And yet but that's healing, and that's healing for a lot of people. And I've had that. I cannot tell you how many times I've had that in here. How, person with migraines, woman with migraines. And, over the time, it became pretty clear that she was in a dysfunctional marriage. It was really dysfunctional. I mean, harming her dysfunctional. And it's like she had to come to terms with that. She had to separate. And it took years to accomplish all that. But now, and then it wasn't great after, because it's not even easy after separations. But then, now her migraines there's some of them, but they're very minimal. They don't interrupt her life. She's become like an entirely, different person. And she'll say like, that was necessary. I could only do it at the level that I did it, or at the pace that she could accomplish it.
Well, we've talked about this a little bit, this idea that there is a point where you have to go through pain to get through the suffering, to really heal, or to feel joy or peace, or whatever you might want to go towards in life.
Yeah, these days, I think I shared with you one of the last times we spoke, my newer theory on emotions is that, yes, they're going to accompany us at all times. Like, we're going to have all different emotional reactions consistently. But what I've been starting to get a glimpse of, or a little of a handle on, is that those emotions are not meant to stop us necessarily from doing it. And they're not the end all be all of the entire situation. They're just almost like there for the ride. Like, they're supposed to be. We're supposed to feel them, but they're not supposed to necessarily stop us from doing things, or determine how we operate in the world. They're just there, basically. We as humans just invest too much in them.
Could you give an example of that?
Yeah, I know. I didn't explain it so well.
No,
I was
you did.
thinking,
It's just, I think it's a big topic.
I know. In Buddhism and everything too, you come across this quite a bit. You come across how emotions don't matter. They're not like in the language. But I had to read all that language in Buddhism and explore that, and then kind of come to it on my own terms, which I felt was a little bit more just my little human way of understanding that information. So recently I was thinking these things. I'm just going to give more of a tiny personal example. When I feel something like, so let's say I have to talk to someone and tell them, like, I'm not happy, a friend or something, like that something's not going right. So I'll speak to them, and I had to do that, right? Because it was important to communicate. And then a lot of emotions will go through me, right? I'll be fearful, I'm going to lose the friend. I'm sad that this thing happened between us. I'm angry because maybe they did something that upset me, all that. But and I still talk to them, and then all those emotions circulate through, like on a bit of a cycle. And what I say to myself is like, okay, right, but it didn't mean that I wasn't that it should stop me from speaking to this person. It's almost just that I have to tolerate the emotional responses. And it doesn't mean a story anymore so much about how what kind of person I am or what kind of friend I am, or even maybe what kind of friend they are. Like, it doesn't even matter so much. It's just that I almost feel like they're passengers. Like, they're on the ride and I'm going to have to just deal with them, but they're not bigger than I thought they were. And I can't deny that they're there. They have to, they're part of it. And even good things, like I've noticed this too, like good, very positive experiences still have, as much as they may feel joyful, they often carry some fear behind there too.
Yeah.
And then they carry sadness as well, I find. And so it's like, oh, I'm joyful. Oh, I'm sad.
Yeah.
I'm a little afraid. I'm afraid that either the joyfulness is going to end, or I'm afraid, whatever my mind puts to it. And then I think to myself, okay, that's fine. Like, I'm feeling those things, but I'm not going to make this out about who I am as a person, how much worth I have, and I'm not going to try. Let's say I'll try, because I slip in these things. I don't do a perfect job of this by any stretch, but I also don't want to say, and I don't want to turn it around and judge the other person too, right, for their shortcomings. Say like, okay, well, they're a person, and again, it doesn't mean I need to be friends with them if our friendship is going to part ways. That's fine too, but has to be some kind of. It's almost like just being present with what is happening and not like sliding away in my investment. It's sliding away in my mind too. Like that's like a type of distortion.
So you're not actually perceiving the actual circumstance maybe off because you're reading into it or allowing the emotion to change it.
Completely. And I think just a primary thing to call out of what I just said was emotions tend to support us in our own story, right? So if your story is that you are not good enough, then your emotions will always bring you back to the fact you're not good enough.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to say, that
right.
I want to separate. So I want to separate the fact that there is the emotion. I can just have that. But it doesn't really mean anything about who I am as a person.
Right.
It just means that I'm feeling this way. And it could even be for, a few minutes that I feel that way.
So how do you tie this to healing? Or if somebody comes in and this is something that we all deal with, and it's like a constant, I would say, mind chatter, because we can tie emotion to everything.
Your
and
whole life.
Speaking to to anything that's happening in your life.
Your whole life's experience sort of will attach itself, because if you think about it too, there's only 7 emotions, basic emotions, or 10 at the most. And right, so you felt them millions of times. So every time you feel one of them, it reminds you of many other times you felt that way. So it takes a lot of, I think the word is presence, where so for me, sometimes if I'm feeling it, I'm going like, okay, well, it's just an emotion. Again, I have to kind of talk myself out of it so that I don't slide in further. Sometimes I'll slide in further anyway, no matter what I do. But
well, is it around awareness? Because if all that can happen, and you can slide into an emotion, and you can kind of go deep down into I call it the rabbit hole.
Right.
Now, it doesn't mean. So sometimes you don't realize, personally, I can say, like, I don't realize that I'm going into the rabbit hole.
Right.
But sometimes when I can conjure up the awareness, which I've had to practice a lot over that probably really since we started working together, because I think that for me was when I started to change my mindset around healing. But that if you don't have awareness around it, you may not be able to change what is happening, but if you have awareness around it, it eventually will change.
Right. You can't change. A lot of times you can't change what's happening right when it's happening. So that's not even an option. I mean, at least the event or whatever's prompting the emotion, often you can't change that. That's something that is concretely happening. You can only, and I don't think most of us are not I mean, some people who have meditated maybe or sat for a very, very long time might be able to pick up a little quicker on when process is happening.
Mm-hmm.
But most people, and I would consider myself of most people in this way, it's a it's a long process of just reminding yourself or looking back at it and saying, okay, look, I slipped in there. Next time I do that a lot. Like I have children, it's just really easy just to slide into a very emotional state very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I always am hard on myself, obviously, because I'll either get angry or yell at them or something. But I think to myself, like, sometimes it'll happen if I can calm myself down afterwards. I'll say, like, okay, so next time that's a time I've just got to be more aware of what I'm doing. And if anything, with my kids, it's such a hard practice that I find like sometimes I just try not to say anything. And if I can just keep my mouth shut and they can move, then I can later say like, okay, at least I sort of changed what happened there.
Mm-hmm. Well, it also, I think that the closer your relationships, the more triggers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
So much easier. Right. Like when I'm working with clients, right, of course, it's so much easier for me to stay pretty grounded and pretty aware of what's going on and separate from it for the most part. But right, in my own life, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But it's good work. It's good practice. And I think it's probably the most important places to practice it.
Well, and this leads to the idea of like, again, that the discomfort. We don't want to be in discomfort, but this is continual practice. And if you keep avoiding it, there's no way to change it.
If you keep avoiding discomfort, then you will cause more and more discomfort for yourself in the end. Mm-hmm. It's not like it goes away. If you can't deal with it, it's basically like it'll backlog itself.
Mm. And have you seen mostly in your practice that becomes a physical manifestation in people's lives?
I would say it almost always contributes to some kind of physical manifestation. Mm-hmm. I would say almost every physical symptom I get in here, anything chronic, has some relationship to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Even if it's, like again, an injury, which is a little easier to look at just as an injury and not say it's attached to an emotion or attached to a way of being in the world. But even then, there's some places where they relate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you have a client come in, how do you support somebody that beyond the fact of like you know what to do for the symptoms and you can relieve the symptoms, the physical symptoms? How does the practice work that you also support them emotionally? I would say perhaps without them really knowing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to take it apart. So the acupuncture itself does some of the supporting without me having to do it. So that's one of the reasons I like acupuncture as a medicine. And I've stayed in the field. So what I just simply say about that is it's because it's energetic medicine, it's almost adaptable in itself. So I can put the points in and it sort of will accomplish some of what needs to be accomplished without me doing it. Mm. And I believe in a certain way, it's not even at that point, it's not even about me. It's about energetic interaction that I understand a little bit, but there's a lot more there that I'd like to understand. So acupuncture, it gets it. And once the energy starts to move, some of the other processes will be kick-started. So that's why sometimes you'll needle someone. And I used to have this happen a lot. Probably still happens, but I don't feel like it's a little bit less than it used to be, where I would be needle someone for a physical symptom and they would start to cry. It's like, okay, well that's okay. We're releasing energy and it's tied into something and that's part of the release, right? Mm-hmm. Or you always hear stories in acupuncture of someone who you do a point and the person goes home and they, like all these things change in their life really fast. Yeah. And they come back and they say, well, it was the acupuncture. I don't know what all this stuff just happened. And you're like, Sometimes that happens,
Yeah.
Sometimes as you remove energy, it moves, and you don't always know exactly what that's going to look like. You can't predict completely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's that. That's one question. So the acupuncture does it. The other way that I've figured out now that works is it's my consciousness. So I sit in the room and I'm as present as I can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I listen really carefully, not just with my ears. Like I watch the way the person's talking and how they're moving. And, I'm taking in as much information. I pay attention to how I feel, not emotionally, not these emotions that we just talked about, but more about how, like almost how I sense what's happening. And then if I have an opportunity, I'll talk a little bit from that place.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I think, most people don't have that experience too often in their lives. They don't get listened to or seen that way.
Mm-hmm.
So the minute it's happening, it does scare some people, like we said, but a lot of people like it because they couldn't even exactly tell you what it was,
Mm-hmm.
but they feel seen, or they feel that listened to, or they they resonate with the fact that there's someone sitting with them and present, pretty present.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone starts some of the healing as well. So that in combination with the acupuncture, I think does a very good job.
It's it's life changing, really. But it's when you describe it in the way that you do, and I still want everybody to go try it, just because it's so there's so much that we can't necessarily put into words with that kind of experience to truly be heard, or to just have the sense. In reiterating what you're saying is that as the client, to really just get this sense that I know
Right.
and that is profound, because so many times when we go to a regular doctor, you're talking to them and you don't feel like you're being heard, or you're being passed by, and people are always saying you need to advocate for your health, especially in hospitals and these different situations. And this is a completely different experience, because you are truly sensing where I'm coming from and what is happening, and healing from that point is it's completely different.
It's a totally different thing. And of course, everything has its place.
Mm-hmm.
So, biomedicine is so
Yes.
important. We need to have that medicine.
Yeah.
And then this medicine, which is newer, not that acupuncture is new. Acupuncture's been around, as we know, 3,000 years, very old.
Mm-hmm.
But I think even acupuncture in the States right now is transforming and we're seeing more examples of what I'm talking about in my field. Even 10 years ago, we didn't see as many examples. We saw a few, but they're definitely getting more.
Why is there this shift?
That's a good question. The truth of it was that this has always been part of acupuncture, as long as it's been around, as far as I understand from my historical reading.
Mm-hmm.
But when the Communist Revolution came into China and sort of shifted around how Chinese medicine was learned, they structured it a bit differently, and they took away on purpose some of the stuff that I'm talking about. They kind of took it out. They buried it.
Okay.
They didn't feel it translated well to the Western mind, and they wanted it to be taken a bit more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So they buried away some of the strange conversations and techniques, and even the language that was in the lineage had been there for a long time. Like they say, like, and I don't love this word, but shamanic, but that kind of idea, it's always been in there, but like I said, they tucked it away. And then they exported TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, which was a much more regimented way to learn acupuncture and Chinese herbs.
Mm-hmm.
And then that is what we got, and that's what people started to learn. And then over years, it's changed, and there were so many Westerners that went into China to study with masters. And then when all that stuff, then then those people were bringing back more of this information that, oh, look, there is shamanic language here. Like, this is really what they think, and so it's sort of caught up with us. and even in my career, because even when I went to school, it wasn't talked about as much. And there were a few practitioners talking that way. And of course, because I was so interested in it, I gravitated towards those practitioners, tried to learn from them. But I didn't hear too many people talking about it. So it really was already it was already weird even, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But now when I'm watching how acupuncturists talk about themselves and reading other acupuncturist websites or Instagram posts, they are talking more about what I'm saying.
And do you
So
think
it's emerging.
okay, and with the advent of social media and this interconnectedness, do you think that information is traveling more rapidly?
I do. I think everything's traveling more rapidly.
Yeah.
I mean, where you would have had to been exposed to either a book or a person to get the information before. Now you can, on Instagram, like 5 people can say it, and and within an hour, you've just been exposed to 5 other acupuncturists saying something about what you're doing, what you're doing.
Right.
So
I want to circle back a little bit to the shamanic language around this. I had a interesting experience, and I want to see what you think about this. So I was with another friend who also goes to see you, and we were talking to we play hockey. We were talking to somebody related to hockey, and they were having some physical issues. We were like, oh, you've tried all these other things. Perhaps you should try going to Japala, because she can really get in and release muscle in a way that massage therapy just doesn't get to. And my friend said the word, she's like, magic.
Right. Magic's a common word used around me
Around
here.
You, yeah.
But I'm careful with it. I don't like to throw it around.
No, and I want to bring this up because I think that I was shocked at the reaction of this person.
Right.
Who it was like, I'm a Christian, I can't do anything that. and my friend was like, didn't get what this person was saying. I was like, oh, it's not like it. We're not saying that it's
like related to Satan, because that's what that means.
Yes, exactly. So can you speak to that? Because I think to the outside, if you don't understand what acupuncture is and you haven't gone through it, it does. And we're speaking around these languages of saying that there are these parts. I wouldn't want for somebody who is deeply religious in somewhere else to think that this is some kind of devil's work, or that they're...
Right. I mean, that's just a misconception as far as I understand. I mean, I have plenty of people who are Christians or Catholics or Jewish or Muslim, and I have any religion coming here. It's not about religion. Acupuncture is not religious. I mean, I guess that's not totally true. There are some religious influences over the years, because Taoism and Confucianism, they were influencing acupuncture as it grew as it was raised in China. Mm-hmm. But as far as what it is now, it's secular. It's medicine.
Yeah.
It doesn't have religion. I can treat anybody with any type of belief system. It doesn't need to match their belief system at all. Okay. I think it's a misconception of the word magic, even on how it's used. I think an old notion of magic kept it... An old notion of magic was associated with, Satan or Satan worship, which is a misconception. That is actually a misconception of what that is.
Right.
And to me, I guess a better explanation, magic is it's like the transformation of energy, right? It's the ability that the energy can transform in a person in all the different ways that we're speaking, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You can have a shift in a person, but it's not a religious. Religious is an old framework. I think that we're trying to put two things together that don't match super well.
Good. I wanted you to explain that, or to say that out loud, because for me, when I hear the word magic, I tie that to miracle, or that they're like you're saying, a transformation. It's just a different...
Right. I wonder if we looked up the word, I don't know about magic, but if we looked up the word miracle, I bet you there's some root in that means some sort of movement. Yes. I bet that the roots mean that. So, yeah, I think the magic, and I didn't even understand this until more recently when I was paying more attention, but yes, magic got associated with Satan. I didn't know that was so prevalent,
I
but it
didn't
is pretty
either.
prevalent. I had no idea.
I didn't know.
I mean, and Satan, has a really bad rap, which
Yeah.
understandably, but again, that's nothing about acupuncture. As far as at least the acupuncture I'm treating, maybe there's someone out there who's doing acupuncture like that, but not what I come across too often.
Thank you for addressing that, because I want to through this having this chat with you is that to just kind of bring this more to people who may not be familiar with what acupuncture is, and to dispel some of the myths around it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like having to explain basic acupuncture to people. I'm always like, ugh. I've had to do that so many times.
I know.
You used to be excited about it, but after a time, you're just like, ugh. Like I don't want to explain it.
No, I get it.
Especially
I get
because
it.
I have changed so much of how I think about it. I
Yeah.
used to talk about energy and the meridians and how they
Yeah.
moved, and now I really don't think it's even like limited in that way anymore. I think so what is acupuncture? I mean, at this point, I think it's energetic medicine, right? That undoes blocks. And there's a primary kind of concept in Chinese medicine that if there's stagnation, you can't have optimal health. So you need to move stagnation to have optimal health. I mean, to me, that's very basic and very true.
To a lot of things in life, like even beyond this.
Well, even moving around, like
Yeah.
exercise, right? Like you have to move your blood, right, to be healthy. So you have to, even what we just said, the emotions, they have to be able to move. They can't
Right.
get totally stuck all the time because then they cause disease. So, but we're not going to stop them from coming. We just have to somehow figure out how to work with them. So they move. And then we move too. Like we can't be humans are very adaptable, so they can be stuck for a very, very long time and adapt. However, it is not the healthiest situation.
Do you see in that, because that relates to me to age, and as we go through this journey of life, there are different points that we go through in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and onward. What have you seen as some of these, I don't want to say trends, but perhaps that are specific to certain generations?
Right. So I don't want to get myself in trouble because I can get my foot stuck in my mouth right here. So I'm saying that. So I'm conscious that I'm not going to get myself totally in trouble.
Okay.
But I do, I've been it seems to me, it's an effort to not get myself in trouble.
Should I frame the question differently? Like it, because if that makes
because I'm about to say something that's going to offend somebody. So let me know. What's another way to ask the question?
Yeah. So let me think about that. Do you think that at a certain age or around a certain age, people are more open to creating change in their life?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think when I look at, because I have children, so I've watched them, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like the business of growing up, through even teenagers is all consuming.
Yeah.
The business of actually your physical body growing and navigating the social terrain, which is really difficult in the world that we live in, and all the environmental factors and everything, that's just going to consume. You don't have any extra thoughts for like what is spiritual or who am I really, that goes, and I would believe that goes through, that's like from when a baby is born, it's more intensive physical growing, obviously those first 15, 16 years. And then they're in their 20s and there's just not enough excess energy for that. They're still just kind of learning how to be here, right? And then you get, and this isn't true for everybody, but most people then hit in their 30s, they're either going to be consumed with child rearing or their occupation or both, but it's an outward expenditure of energy. So then there's just not a lot of time. You're busy all the time doing these things. So I think it starts in the mid 30s, late 30s, 40s, and then I see it progress pretty consistently after that. So my patients that are in their 60s, their 50s and their 60s, they're really thinking about what we're talking about because they've done some of these other things. They've mostly raised their children, or have gotten far enough in their career that they can think about other things. And then they start, and I also feel like they're physically more probably embodied enough in their body by that age. And that's not true for everyone, because you're going to get exceptions everywhere.
Right.
But then they can say, like, oh, really, why am I here? Like,
Yeah.
really, what is the purpose of my life? And so they have a little more room for it. But one of the things that I like to do, and what I've been playing around, so because I taught a class to a bunch of teenagers, I think it was last week, teenagers in like 20 somethings.
Yeah.
And I was really putting it to them then, because I wanted them to start, well, what I was starting to say to them, because I thought, as I had thought out what I was going to teach and how I was going to deliver my information, one of the things that felt so important to me was that I wanted them to start with being embodied, start with using their energy in the world like as authentically as possible, rather than what I feel like happens to most of us is that we don't do that, and then we spend a lot of years almost trying to fix what we've done in the past. And I think it's partly because people don't have a language for it. They don't get exposed to it. They don't even know how to even start talking about something like that or feel that. And so in this class, I was making a big point to say, how do you feel? And this is about you knowing yourself and using your energy in the world that would match the way that you are. There's nothing wrong with you because maybe you do things differently than someone else. If you can come to terms with that and accept that and really know yourself, then you would be making already in an earlier part of your life more decisions that match who you are.
Can you speak even a little bit more on this?
Yeah. So the model that I've been using for this, because I thought about this, was the 5-element model, right? So I decided that's the best way to articulate it, because the 5 elements makes sense. They're, 5 archaic energies that have existed throughout all time, that we see in nature, that we all have inside of us. They're, ubiquitous. We resonate with it. If you get some tutelage on the elements, you're like, yeah, I totally understand. I mean, you don't understand everything, but you know what it's like to sit next to a fire. You know what it's like to sit next to a body of water. You know how that feels, right? And they're all different energies, right? But they all exist together. They can't be, we can separate them out as a form of tutelage to understand them, but we can't take them away from each other. So that makes sense. That's you give that explanation. It's not religious. That's another bonus. So it doesn't make anybody uncomfortable. You have this, and then you say, so most of us, right, we exhibit 1 or 2 elements dominantly of the 5. And if you can know that about yourself at a younger age, this is what I was trying to do with those kids. So if they could identify their own element earlier, then they'd say, oh, okay, so this is how I work in the world. I know kind of the flavor of my energy in the world. So I know how I can use it. I know that when I'm talking to interacting with a different element, I know that's why sometimes it does, like, we don't agree, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
And I can even use that to how I was pushing these kids to start diagnosing who they were talking to. And if they could do that, they could say, well, like, I'm a wood causative, I'm using an example, but I'm a wood causative factor. I'll use a better example. I had, even in that class, I had someone saying, I ran through all the elements and they were like, oh, one of my kids is one of those elements and one of my kids is the other, a different element. And she's like, do you have, what do you, she brings that up. And I said, yeah, mine too. I got 2 different element kids. So I know if I'm not getting too emotional and losing it with my children, I know that I can say I have to treat them differently because one wants to be talked to a different way than the other one. And if I can remember that, it does smooth it out a little bit better. So it's so much bigger than that. It's like, that's just an example. That's just like a symbolism for it. But if you could know really, I mean, these are cheesy terms that we have a little bit overused right now in our culture. And I'm always skittish when I use them because I don't want to sound cheesy at all.
I know.
It's like, I've worked hard not to sound cheesy, but, But if you really could know yourself and identify yourself and feel confident about who you are and that there is nothing wrong with you, maybe you are a little short tempered. Okay. You know what I mean? I could kind of know that about yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can make a lot more decisions about how you're going to use your energy in the world. And those decisions would ultimately guide you to more expansive experiences rather than getting us so stuck and limited.
I think that that is a beautiful explanation of all this, and it is, you know, that is probably where most people's problems come up, is that they don't have a strong sense of self, which it's hard to in general, especially with outside influences that we cannot ignore. But
Well,
that kind of journey, or trying to find that, and I do not want to use the word authentic because it's way
that one's
overused,
overused. Yeah.
but
That used to be not so much, but now it is
it is, and
too much.
it's beyond that. I mean, it's a little bit more than being authentic, because again, most people don't even know what that is within
Well, now
themselves.
authentic, the problem with the word is now it's been used to advertise and sell you products. So
Yeah.
now authentic is about, buying shoes or makeup or something. And once it's being used like that, then again, I can't, I feel uncomfortable using it here because I don't think that's what I'm trying to accomplish at all.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to accomplish the opposite thing that people are um, I mean, this is a crazy thing, but this is how my work has been going lately. But I feel this. This is my thing. I want to say the most is that people are ultimate. Well, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who I really really like, he has this concept of basic goodness,
Mm-hmm.
and he says so everybody's basically good. Like they're not flawed. There's nothing wrong with anybody. You're basically like divine, just for who you are, for being here, for coming into this you know, living your life as a human. So that's fundamental. And and if we could kind of stay there and then again know our ways, like know our energies,
Mm-hmm.
then you'd go into careers that really probably work well for you and you hopefully pick more relationships that resonate for you and just ultimately I feel like be more present and more joyful and not joyful contingent on like our making a lot of money or any of those things, but joyful just in the basicness of like it's a sunny day and
Yeah.
I laughed with a friend and I had a good meal, like really keep it, you can keep it kind of on the simpler side as well.
It's funny, we're born as divine, and yet we then spend the rest of our lives trying to get back there.
It's totally true. And the
Yeah.
cult, and again, and I'm too famous for like blaming the culture. I say that all the time and I'm trying to figure out better words. But really the water that we're swimming in now, this world, it's it's doing everything but telling us what I just said.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it as an ego boost either. It's not that. It's truly just as the person that you are, really truly who you are, not how good you are at something or not that part. I'm not boosting that up. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just saying it's just like by being human, you have you're 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 divine for that reason only. What you do with it, that's different. But so that's what I was thinking. The five elements that are just in a way a framework to have that conversation and a framework to have a better intellectual grasp on the conversation and also tools to use it because you can use the tools of the five element. You can say I'm a water causative factor. I know this about myself. I can say these causative factors like the dominant element you are.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that and you can say, oh, like my partner's a wood and I know I need to understand that so that when we're having an argument I can say I would do it this way, but I know like I
Yeah.
understand the way you're doing it too. And that makes the communication a little bit better.
I'm sad to say we have to wrap this up because I know you have a client after this.
Yeah.
But I want to say one of the things that I just appreciate about you so much is that in the beginning we talked about having confidence in the work that you do and also a consciousness around what you do. One of the things that I'm really impressed with is that you are a continual student. So although you are in this position to an authoritative position, which I don't think that you would ever say.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
Never say that.
Well, and this is what's so beautiful about you is there's this humbleness of being a life student. You truly, I think you love what you do, because when I look at what you talk about and how you educate yourself, and you're continually interested in learning and being more about your practice, I think that that's a really special thing, because most people lose interest over time in what they're doing, or they feel disconnected from what they actually do for work. And I really feel like you are doing what you were meant to be doing here. And that, and with our conversation, is the most embodiment of yourself. Like, you are practicing what you are wanting to bring out in other people. And that is really beautiful. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for the compliment. I really tried to feel it deeply and appreciate it. Thank you. And yeah, this process has been long and difficult, because there were so many times in the years, like when I was young, a teenager, I knew I wanted to be an acupuncturist. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even explain exactly why. I just was like, I'm going to be an acupuncturist. Yeah. And then I finished college. I went to acupuncture school. I did accomplish what I wanted. And in acupuncture school, I thought, wait, what am I doing here? Like, I didn't, because you don't know what acupuncture means unless you don't know what you're in for until you're in school. I said, they're not talking about any of the things that I find are interesting, or why I wanted to be in this field. So then finally, I remember I went to one grand rounds, which is when like a teacher treats in front of the class. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about this stuff. And I was like, I remember her that day, she was writing it on the board and she's talking about it. And I was like, like, this is it. This is what I wanted to learn. So immediately after class, go to talk to her. Like, I pepper her with tons of questions, and ultimately then studied with her for a number of years after I graduated, and that's Lori Deschard. She has her own, she writes books, and she's pretty amazing. But then even after that, I got into the field myself, and I spent years in here going like, I'm not doing what I want to be doing. I don't know how to do what I want to do. How do you do this? And then research, and then lots of my own tumultuous experiences in my own life that were very, very difficult. And then I said, and then clinical practice, and constantly questioning, like, is it working? Is it working? Is it real? And then finally, I feel like it kind of tentatively came into a space that I was like, okay, yes, no, I know what this is. I can even talk about it. Mm-hmm. I know it works. And I know even how to achieve it now. So I learned, but it took years of all that. So,
well, it truly is a practice. Like, most people give up early on, but you have to keep showing up to be really good at anything, or to really. And this is where it's such a good example of that, because without the highs and lows, without questioning, there's no way that you can't go through this without at some point questioning what you're doing.
I think it would be almost like it's pretty much a daily questioning. I'm still questioning. I mean, my nature is question anyway, but I'm still questioning myself. And even as I say this to you, I'm like, I don't want to sound egotistical. Oh, don't sound too with too much hubris that you can even say this to somebody. But mm-hmm. But if I hope I'm communicating it not in that way, and I hope I'm communicating it from a more genuine place, and that I see it, and it's. The other thing is, like, none of this stuff is like pretty. It's all messy. Yeah. It's all up and down and mixed around with a lot of feelings and a lot of like messiness. But the more that I'm looking at everything, I'm thinking like that's pretty much true of all of it. We pretend that it's not messy, but it really is messy always.
And I appreciate you saying that out loud. And this is one of the things I want to get through with these conversations, because it's so easy to just put the highlight of, well, I started here and I ended up here, and look how successful I am. And
right.
And that is not, in going back to, again, like being truly within yourself, or what your true experience is. This messiness is life.
Messiness is life, and craziness is life, and everybody's a little crazy, and I was beginning to just think recently, like, if we could just stop assuming they weren't crazy, we wouldn't be so surprised anymore. We would just say, like, okay, even of ourselves, like, if we were, because when I get a little crazy, I'm like, well, I shouldn't be crazy. I know better, and it's like, but sometimes I can't like control all that about myself. So,
Well, Japala, if people want to find out more about you,
thanks for asking.
no problem. Where should they go?
So I've got a website that I work diligently to keep adding new material to. It's not all about acupuncture anymore because in my writing I've started to branch out into more commentary beyond acupuncture. But that website is transpersonalacupuncture.com. And I've been posting on Instagram and making it a fun project to do tiny, short blogs on all sorts of things that I relate to, either acupuncture or five element or even just spiritual or cultural commentary. And that is the handle is transpersonal_acupuncture.
Wonderful. Japala, thank you so much. And thank you so much for the work you've done with me. My life really has been transformed working with you. And I appreciate that so much.
The truth is, it's just as I enjoy it as much to work with you as you've enjoyed working. It's so rewarding for me to look at someone and see them. I don't know. It's transformative for me to be a part of that process as it is for you. So that's why I think it's so healthy. So
thank you.
I'm grateful.